Good morning, everyone, and happy St. Patrick's Day. My name is Maria Kelson. I'm the Public Relations and Volunteer Coordinator here at the Cosmosphere, and I want to thank you so much for coming out today. I love your festive colors. This is an exciting coffee at the Cosmo for a number of reasons. One, our exciting topic, which I'll tell you about in a minute. Two, it happens to be on St. Patrick's Day, which comes with a special for guests today because we have a new documentary in our Kerry Digital Dome on Ireland, narrated by Liam Neeson. If anyone's a Liam Neeson fan, you'll enjoy this one. And if you buy a ticket today on St. Patrick's Day, you also get a ticket for a free large popcorn and large soda. So that's a big treat today. Come on in. Anybody who still hasn't gotten your food, you're welcome to get food. You're welcome to get seconds anytime. I want to start off by thanking our staff who made this possible. Mimi Meredith, who is here today, and Michelle McCartney, our Director of Content. Thanks so much to both of you. Give them a round of applause. And I also want to thank Jack Graber, our VP for technology, helping all of this happen today. He couldn't make it today, but I want to thank him and acknowledge him, as well as our wonderful facility staff who helped put together this beautiful room for you. The other thing I need to let you know is I'll just ask your patience while I'm going back and forth between a couple of different displays. This is a hybrid event, so we welcome you all in person and we welcome our viewers on Zoom as well. Those of you who are regulars know we've been doing hybrid events for a few sessions now, but it does come with a few little extra steps along the way. So I ask your indulgence as we move through those. With that in mind, I'm going to go on to the next step, switching over to our corporate partners so that you can see the wonderful people who, with their support, make their wonderful logos. We want to thank these corporate partners for supporting Coffee at the Cosmo: Evergy, Clayworks, Dillon's, KU School of Engineering, and RCB Bank. Please do thank them with your time and your business. They are wonderful supporters of the Cosmosphere. So today we have two speakers, and our topic is the fallen sky, an intimate history of shooting stars. That topic is taken from a book title by our first speaker. So I'll introduce our first speaker, and he'll speak for about 15-ish, 20-ish minutes. We'll have a couple of questions for him, time for a couple of questions. Then we'll go to our next speaker, who I will introduce to you before he comes up. And then we'll open the floor to questions for either speaker. So if you don't get your question answered that first round, hopefully in the second round, we'll get to your questions. And so the topic, shooting stars, meteorites, I was inspired to do this event because of this book, The Fallen Sky, An Intimate History of Shooting Stars. This book is written by a friend of mine who I taught with at Utah State University in Logan, Utah, a little while ago, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. And he's coming to us live from Salt Lake now. This is Chris Coquinos. So let me introduce him to you. His book really inspired my awe and my wonder about meteorites, about things coming from space to the Earth, just the marvel of that. And so I really wanted to bring that to you. And then you'll see our second speaker brings a truly local angle and a really exciting local angle to this particular topic as well. So our first speaker is Chris Coquinos, an award-winning science writer. His book that I mentioned, The Fallen Sky, An Intimate History of Shooting Stars, took him from 600 miles north of the Arctic Circle to the icy plains of Antarctica. And we'll get to hear a little bit about that. He is currently working on a book about the moon. So he's a true space enthusiast. He contributes regularly to astronomy.com and is wrapping up a teaching career of more than 30 years. He is a professor at the University of Arizona. So if you will give a hearty welcome, I promise I will bring him up here on the screen, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Chris Coquinos.
Hello, everyone. Is my sound coming through? Can you all hear me?
Yes, Chris, we can hear you loud and clear. I am going to make sure we can see you as well.
Okay. Well, while Maria is doing that, thank you so much for that kind introduction. That's very, very sweet. Maria is a fine writer herself, if you don't know that, a wonderful poet. So I was delighted to hear that she and John, her husband, had landed in Hutchinson, Kansas, because I was at Kansas State University for many years. And this book, The Fallen Sky, really begins with stories from Kansas. So I wanted to mention that, and to also thank everyone there at the Cosmosphere who made this happen, and just to put a plug in for that facility. I have spent a lot of time visiting air and space museums for various reasons, for fun, but also for research. One of the things I'm writing about in this moon book is the origin of the Saturn V rocket and the German rocket team. And it was the Cosmosphere many years ago. I visited for the first time and learned the story of the German rocket team, not entirely happy story, as we know, if you've been through that exhibit. And so I just want to put a plug in for what the Cosmosphere has done in terms of its exhibits and its historical accuracy. So it means a lot to be speaking to you today. I am going to talk to you about meteorites and say a little bit here first about The Fallen Sky. This is a book, as I said, that began in Kansas. I had just finished a book on extinct birds, which I had written primarily while I was in Kansas. And I wanted to get away from, the stories of those birds. They're profoundly moving. I wanted to find something that might be a little more awe-inspiring. And so I turned to the night sky, and I learned pretty quickly about a Kansas farm wife, and maybe Don will speak a little bit about this as well, a woman named Eliza Kimberly, who happened to find an extremely rare kind of meteorite on her property in Kansas in the 19th century. I learned about Harvey Neinager, and I'll say a little bit more about his story in a few moments. But he was based in McPherson and taught at the college there. And he became, during the Depression, the world's foremost collector, dealer, and researcher on meteorites. A fascinating figure, still somewhat controversial because he blended his business with science. But Harvey Neinager really changed our understanding of how common meteorites are and how one can go about finding them. So this is a book that, as Maria says, took me all over the world. I went to Australia as well to see an ancient impact structure that helps us understand evolution on Earth. I traveled north of the Arctic Circle to track down where Robert Peary, the polar explorer, had basically saved his career because he hadn't gotten to the North Pole yet. But while he was in Greenland, he found 3 giant iron meteorites that are on display now in New York City. So I went around the world for this book. So it's also a chronicle of my own life during that time, in some tumultuous moments in my life, which sort of in some senses oddly parallels those of some of the meteorite hunters I profile. So it's a book about obsession, as you might have gathered. So The Fallen Sky weaves all those things together. And I'm going to just share with you a little bit about meteors, meteorites. I'm going to share with you a little bit about the story of Harvey Neinager and my time in Antarctica. And if I need to, I will go open the door to let a cat in as I do this presentation, so you're not bothered by his yowling. I hope you don't hear him right now. Okay, so let me screen share if I'm able to. There we go. And here we are. So The Fallen Sky, An Intimate History of Shooting Stars. And again, it's a pleasure to read from this book. It's been a few years since I've completed the book, and it's fun to talk about. I'm also happy to talk about the moon, which is I'm in Salt Lake, but I'm also on the moon at this point as well. So just so we're clear, there are 3 basic terms. So here's your elementary science lesson for the day. Meteoroids, meteors, and meteorites, 3 different things. Meteoroids are rocks in space. They tend to be smaller than asteroids and planetoids, so there's a range of size, but that's, when you have the rock actually in outer space. Meteors are their passage through the atmosphere. And meteorites are what land on the Earth. So here's a picture of Bennu, which you may know, we recently visited Bennu with the OSIRIS-REx mission and took a sample. That mission was led actually by a colleague at the University of Arizona. So this is an asteroid. It's a pretty loose aggregation of rubble. A smaller version of this we might call a meteoroid. And of course, shooting stars, meteors. And we get to see those throughout the year. Meteor showers as well as random meteors. In meteorites, this happens to be a very large one, and you can see this is a picture taken in the early 20th century with 2 fetching children nestled inside the crags of this giant iron meteorite. This is another story I tell in the book. This is the Willamette Meteorite that was found by an itinerant worker in Oregon named Ellis Hughes in early 20th century. This thing was very heavy, several tons. He moves it by himself and charges admission to people near Portland. And it turns out it was on somebody else's property. So he had several court cases. He loses the meteorite. It's now, again, it's on display in New York City where you can see it. It is a really impressive piece of iron. This is the Ensens Heim stone. This is from Alsace-Lorraine. This is the oldest known witnessed fall of a meteorite. So meteorites are falling all the time. Sometimes we see them. Most of the time we don't. Most of them fall in the water, since we live on a planet that's mostly water. But occasionally you'll see a meteor fall and it delivers a meteorite and you can find it. And that's what Harvey Neinager was interested in doing when he began meteorite hunting. But this is the oldest known fall. It's from the 15th century, and you can see it on display in a place called Ensensheim. This caused a lot of panic among the French peasants who witnessed it, and remains the oldest known witnessed fall in Western history. So I've mentioned Harvey's name a few times, and here's a picture of him out in Arizona. You can see maybe he's holding a magnet and it's picked up an iron meteorite, and he spent a lot of time around Meteor Crater in Arizona, which I recommend that you visit. Very briefly, Harvey Neinager is a professor, teaches entomology and science at McPherson College. He's married, has a family. This is in the Depression. Stable income. He's in a good position. And then one night, he sees something that changes his life. So I just would like to read this very brief passage about that night, and then I'll say a little bit more about Harvey Neinager. In McPherson, Kansas, at the corner of Euclid and Maxwell, 2 friends stood talking in the evening air. Harvey Harlow Neiniger and Elmer Craik, professors at McPherson College, who had just walked from a revival in the campus chapel, and the men had stopped in front of Craik's home. Friday, November 9th, 1923 had been a warm day, though now at 9 p.m., the air promised a night of barely open windows and unfurled blankets. The mercury had dropped below freezing twice already in November, and the 36-year-old Neiniger, a biologist, knew the seasons and their markers far better than most. The kites and vultures had gone, and during the day, light mellowed over the prairie. Pegasus would ride the sky near zenith, while Orion the hunter peaked above the horizon, endlessly pressing his quarry. Then, an obscure Kansas naturalist, Harvey Neiniger knew that standing with a friend on a pleasant autumn night was a gift. He would have felt that. And though the Earth's orbits around its star would go on, and how could he now begrudge any passing season? Harvey Neiniger had for weeks wondered what his future promised, wondered if he should do something new, if he should study something mysterious, a thing so remarkable and little known that few people gave the matter much thought. On a small town street corner, two friends talked. Perhaps moments like this are enough, perhaps not. The warm reprieves always pass. Suddenly, a blazing stream of fire pierced the sky, lighting the landscape as though nature had pressed a giant electric switch, Harvey once recalled. The blade of light vanished, leaving a darkness seeming thicker than before. One instant, a man is standing in the dark, and the next he's riding a trail of light to the end of his days. I think of the poet Rilke, who said, "One moment your life is a stone in you, and the next a star." For Harvey, stone and star would be one, for as the poet also said, it is impossible to untangle the threads. So Harvey Neiniger had been reading about meteorites a little bit before that. You might gather he was in a bit of a midlife crisis, and he became fascinated with them, and then amazingly actually witnesses a meteor falling, a fireball. So a fireball is a very bright meteor that explodes. So he decides to search for any stones that may have fallen from this event. He doesn't find any, but he begins to realize you can look for meteorites and you can find them and you can study them. And you can also, because as I say, as his life goes on in the Depression, he quits his job at McPherson College and starts a business and eventually relocates to Meteor Crater and then later Sedona, Arizona. And he has this building, by the way, if you go to Meteor Crater, you can see this old tower is still visible, and you can drive up to it and visit it. So he blends science and commerce, takes this, really gutsy move, in the Depression with a family, quits his job and becomes, works part-time for a while in Denver, and sort of stakes his own claim on meteorites in and looking for them, studying them and researching them. And so here's a photo of Harvey at his museum. I believe this might be in Sedona. I don't know if this is the one at Meteor Crater now. I don't remember, but you can see the rocks there, and the school children. Perhaps you can see their expressions. I don't know how happy they are to be in the photograph, but Harvey Neiniger changes the course of science, the course of our understanding of meteorites, and really pioneered the field of looking for them around the world. So that's a brief story of Harvey Neiniger, who starts there in Kansas. Well, so I knew as I was working on this book that I wanted to look for meteorites as well. And I had two or three options. One would be to go to North Africa. Meteorites are best found in deserts where they stand out against the dry conditions in the local geology. Well, Antarctica is also a desert. And so I applied to join this annual expedition, the Antarctic Search for Meteorites, which is funded by the National Science Foundation here in the US, and sometimes funded by NASA. And I joined a team almost 20 years ago. I can't quite believe it. We are a group of geologists and scientists, mountaineers. I'm the poet on the expedition, there to write about it. But I was doing all the work that everybody else was doing. So I wasn't just, a freeloader in Antarctica. That's me on a snowmobile, all geared up, looking a little bit like Darth Vader, as we do a practice camping trip because we were going to be camping the entire time. When we eventually were ready to go out into the field, we first flew to the South Pole. As I was looking at these photographs yesterday in preparation for the talk today, I was just kind of amazed that that's me. 20 years ago, I can't quite believe I got there. And it was cold. So just in case you're wondering. And then we deployed to a place called the Paz Ice Fields. And just so you're aware of time, I'm almost finished with my presentation, so we can hear from Don, and you guys can see some meteorites there in person. So this is an area ironically named for Lincoln La Paz, who was a professor at New Mexico, who was Harvey Neiniger's greatest rival, and they were bitter enemies. So we ended up at the La Paz Ice Fields, which look a little bit like this. So speaking of prairies, that's one of my teammates walking back to our camp. Those little dots on the horizon are 4 canvas tents. So we stayed in tents. We had little stoves that we would keep on while we were in them, except when it was time to sleep. Of course, it was daylight all the time. We're there in December and January. So it's summer in Antarctica. Very desolate place. But you can see here the blue ice in the foreground is the kind of ice where the meteorites would be trapped. And I can say a little bit more about that. Let me just read, I'll just read one paragraph from the book and then show you a couple more pictures. So this is set at the La Paz Ice Fields. We're camped on hard snow that's pocked or flat or broken like flakes near dimpled blue ice. We're surrounded by an Antarctic prairie that in one direction gives way to low rolls and swells that remind me of the Smoky Hills of Kansas. The wind-shaped snow extends to the horizon. Sastrugi, those hard-packed furrows that metaphor can make into hundreds of shapes. Inches or feet high, they become fish hooks and mesas, plowshares and ridges, catchy fins and talons. Some of them look like tears. Where snow gives out, the blue ice begins, not smooth, but scalloped like a mold of mammatus clouds. The ice itself is the color of blue eyes with cataracts. Compacted snow inside the ice and crevasses filled with snow on the surface cross this blue like a cubist painting of crazed kelp. So it was a pretty intense place. It doesn't go entirely well for me, but I'll save that. If you read the end of the book, you'll see what happens. Here are a couple more pictures. I then move on to a smaller team, 2 tents, 4-person. You can get a sense of the camp. This is in the mountains now, away from the flat area of La Paz, the sort of rolling hills and flat area of La Paz. This is a place called the Otway Massif. And here's yours truly collecting a meteorite. We had a procedure that we had to go through. And I mentioned blue ice. Basically what happens is ice moves in Antarctica the way it moves, as glaciers do. And it'll push up against subsurface mountain ranges and actual above surface mountain ranges. Because meteorites fall at the same rate everywhere around the planet, they're landing there too, and they get trapped in the ice. And eventually that ice rises up, the meteorites rise up, and the wind strips the ice away. A few warm days, melts a little bit, and you can start collecting meteorites. Beautiful, sublime landscape, very intense work. And this will give you one more view of a meteorite. They came in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and we were collecting at the Otway Massif one kind of meteorite. It was one that blew up, sent fragments all over that area. And that's my glove to give you a bit of perspective. So with that, I thank you and would love to hear from Don and look forward to any questions that you have.
All right, thank you so much, Chris. So besides being my friend, Chris has been one of my writing mentors and models. And I think from the little bit that he read, you can see why. He really brings both the personalities and the stories of science and then the sense of place behind scientific exploration to life. He brings all of that to life. And we have time now for one or two questions for Chris. And I'll take yours and then anybody else or Zoom. I can take a Zoom question. And then I will introduce our next speaker, who Chris gave you a little teaser of, is our famous Don. Okay, good. So we'll have our two questions here. And then if you have questions for Chris that don't get addressed here, we'll have time at the end for more questions. So go ahead. Question one.
A number of weapons of myth and legend, including the sword Excalibur, were forged from meteoric iron.
All right. So, Chris, in your book, do you talk about the connection to myth and legend in terms of using meteoric iron to forge weapons, such as the Excalibur story?
That's a great question. I don't mention the Excalibur story, but I do have a chapter devoted to the sort of folklore and mythology of meteors and meteorites, and that is part of our deep sort of cross-cultural, cross-temporal relationship with these things. So the stone of Kaaba, for example, which is sacred in the Islamic culture, is thought to have been a meteorite. Turns out, I don't believe it is. Actually, I'd have to recheck the chapter. But there are such stories. And in Greenland, the Inuit were using the iron from these three giant meteorites that Robert Peary then basically stole and took back to New York. They were chipping away using giant basalt chunks to get that iron off and using that for fish hooks and weapons and implements and tools. So that history, both practical and cultural, mythologically, in terms of religion, goes back and crosses cultures. It's quite deep and quite rich.
Great, thank you, Chris. Yeah, this is a question from Don, Chris, and it's one that's probably on several viewers' minds. How did you physically get to Antarctica? Where did you fly out of, and how did you connect? And what were your planes, trains, and automobiles?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it was a pretty epic trip. Briefly, it was the fall of 2003, and before I went to Antarctica, I mean, it's not every day one gets to do that. And you fly out of Christchurch, New Zealand, on a C-130 Hercules that has skis on it, and then you fly to McMurdo, which is on the Ross Sea coast. We tried, I think, 3 times to go and we were on the planes and turned back 3 times because of weather. But I had planned also to do other research in New Zealand and research in Australia. So I don't remember the exact number of plane flights, but it was almost 24 in the course of about 4 months. So it was insane. And there's no way I could do it now. But yeah, we got to Antarctica on a C-130, all, geared up in our cold weather gear. And I remember distinctly needing to, if I may, I know it's morning, but I really needed to pee. And there's no, lavatory on a C-130. There's a bucket behind a curtain. So when we landed in Antarctica, I was both amazed by the landscape and needed to heed the call of nature. So it was maybe a foreshadowing of the physical and psychological difficulties of being there, because it is a very intense place.
That does sound very intense. All right, good. Well, thank you so much. Back. So when I put this event together, I really wanted to highlight the stories behind meteorite discoveries, the people, the personalities, the stories, and the Kansas connection. And this next speaker embodies the people the stories, and the Kansas connection. So I'm thrilled to introduce to you Don Stimpson, who you may know travels with his wife, Sheila Knepper. She couldn't come today. She has work on the farm. It's springtime, and unfortunately, we scheduled an event when our farmers are out there busy. But Don and Sheila have been interested in Kansas meteorites for 30 years, and they're happy to present some of the things they have learned about H.O. Stockwell. That's Don's topic today. He was a pioneer meteorite hunter from Hutchinson, that's Stockwell, and his legacy lives on in the Space Wanderer meteorite that Stockwell found. So Don will tell us more about him, and you may also know him as having run the Meteorite Museum in Havilland for years. So please give a warm welcome to Don Stimpson. So Don, it'll take me just a second to bring up your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Maria and Cosmosphere, for having me here, and Heather Coynes at the Big Well in Greensburg for setting this up. Yeah, where to begin? We've been doing this for quite some time. 1991, my wife and I got interested in meteorites and finding meteorites with metal detectors. And we were in Chicago at the time working at Abbott Laboratories, and Sheila had just found an iron meteorite in Trenton, Wisconsin. Okay. And we thought we'd try our hand in finding meteorites in Kansas. And one of the attractions that brought us here was what's called the Space Wanderer. It's a 1,000-pound Brenham palisite meteorite at the Big Well. You can go there and see it anytime they're open. The current idea is that this meteorite fell about 20,000 years ago, and it was found in 1949 by H.O. Stockwell, a local fellow, and Ellis Peck, who was local to Greensburg. And I'll say just a short part about it fell a second time during the big tornado in Greensburg. Yeah, just 2 feet this time, but it survived and it's back on display. Oh, there we go. Okay, and this is the cosmic star of the show here, the Space Wanderer. It's weighs 1,000 pounds. They're very heavy for their size because they contain so much metal. It's about 3 feet long, 2 feet wide, and about 1.5 feet thick. And well, that didn't translate too well. I've got some extraneous stuff on here. Chris has already given a really good introduction to meteorites. Basically, they come from parts of asteroids. There's tens of thousands of asteroids between Mars and Jupiter. And on occasion, they collide with one another, releasing fragments. And if the meteoroid and the Earth are at the same place at the same time, you can have a fall. And for the Brenna Meteorite, they've studied this extensively. They believe that it came from an asteroid that was 250 miles in diameter, so like a small planetoid. And there was a collision 156 million years ago that released this fragment. And it wandered around on its orbit, and the Earth went around the sun 156 million times before they finally met up and had the fall some 20,000 years ago. And even before the settlers in the area, the Brenna Meteorite Strewn field seems to have been known even from by the Native Americans. As Chris mentioned, people used the metal to make various things. The Hopewell Indians made jewelry and buried them in the mounds, burial mounds in Ohio, 900 miles away. So somehow they traded or acquired some of the material. The Brenham Strewn field, you can see it here. This is Greensburg. I think I've got a pointer. Greensburg. I'm not very good with technology. Greensburg over here, Havilland over here. And about 6-8 miles long is where we find the pieces of meteorite. The larger meteorites are found at the east end of the Strewn field, smaller back towards Greensburg. And the physics of meteor flight, the large meteors, the large objects fly farther. So we know that this came in from the west-northwest and just spread tons of this meteorite. This was all one fall that occurred at the same time. And then in more modern times, when settlers started to come to the area, Frank and Eliza Kimberly settled at the what's now known as the Kimberly Meteorite Farm. And Frank was a farmer and breaking new ground and breaking his plow on these heavy iron meteorites that were all over the area. Back then, they were laying on the ground, and he didn't like them very much. But Eliza, for whatever reason, she learned about it in school. I'm not real clear on that part of the story, but she recognized the material as being something very special, meteorites, and knew that they were prized by scientists, museums, and of course treasure hunters, because they could sell those to the institutions for study. And in addition to recognizing the significance of these materials they were finding, she also was what they call a shrewd horse trader. So she was able to parlay her meteorites into purchasing more land around the area, finding more meteorites, and had one of the first cars, I'm told, in Kiowa County. So I think that's a 1908 Model T or something. Oh, let me back up. Can I back up with that? Oh, there we go. Okay. I'm finally getting with the program here. That's Eliza Kimberly in the back and Frank Kimberly sitting next to his son there. And Chris also mentioned Harvey Neinager, and he had visited the area as well. After the Kimberleys had passed away, there was a buffalo wallow, wet area that was always suspected to have something to do with the meteorite fall. And so he excavated that crater and pulled out 1,200 pounds of meteorite material. Now, it was a wet area, so instead of having all the nice metal that you usually see in the Brenham meteorite, what he found were things he called meteoroids. They're very rusted. Most of the metal is oxidized and even flowed out of the meteorite and into the surrounding area. When you dig around out there, it's all just orange colored soil from this meteorite. Okay. I messed it up again. I'm sorry. There we go. And after the Kimberleys, this fellow, Alice Peck, purchased the land, the Kimberly Meteorite Farm, and he was very interested in the whole story, the history. He was a local historian for Greensburg. And later in life, he even wrote a book, chronicled the Kimberleys and everybody that had come to the area. And that's Sheila. That's on one of our trips out to Kansas. We'd come out and visit with Alice, and he would tell us his stories of the high plains. And then we'd go out and cook our brains, swinging the metal detector around, trying to find pieces of meteorite. Okay. Did I get it? Okay. So Alice Peck owned the land. So when this fellow, H.O. Stockwell, showed up with an interest in finding meteorites, they struck up a real good friendship, partnership. And H.O. Stockwell, a local fellow, lived in Hutchinson, and part owner and excuse me, I'm getting pretty dry here. I apologize. Part owner of the electric company.
They won't be able to hear you on Zoom, so you can take a quick break.
Sorry.
That's fine.
He's part owner of the Hilton Electric Company, and so very interested in electronics of the time, and metal detectors were starting to become available. So he was able to get one of these prototype metal detectors. He's got it mounted on a wheelbarrow type setup there, and struck up this partnership with Ellis Peck to look for meteorites. And the Hilton Electric Company, the building, it's still there. I just drove by it. It's just off of East Sherman, just off of Main Street, about a block and a half. It's owned by a different electric company now, but it is still there. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, this 122 to 128 East Sherman. So you can drive by there. And that's where Mr. Stockwell worked out of the shop there. You know, selling more consumer electronics, but with his background, he became interested in metal detectors. He was a bit of a treasure hunter. Also looked for gold bullion, lost gold shipments down in Oklahoma too. So kind of a interesting fellow. But his real claim to fame was meteorites. So in Brenham here, he found, I've tried to catalog everything he found, and it's in the thousands of pounds, in addition to the meteorite space wanderer that he found, several thousand other pounds of Brenham meteorite from the area. He stocked several museums and supplied scientific community with quite a bit of material. Brenham's about I'd say an hour and 20 minutes south. Yep, head down south through Pratt, and then it's kind of in between Greensburg and Havilland. All that's left of the town of Brenham right now is a grain elevator in one house. It didn't make it as a town. So here's Mr. Stockwell with his 1,000-pound space wanderer. It was 5 feet deep. They dug the hole by hand and pulled it out with a chain hoist. And this is Ellis Peck's side of the equation there. That's Ellis in the middle, and Bob Peck, his son, and then Merlin Peck later in life. He's the one that published the book, the manuscript that Ellis Peck wrote up, Space Rocks and Buffalo Grass. Yeah, what do you do with a 1,000-pound meteorite? Well, they sold it to Greensburg. It says for $1 and other considerations, it was $1,000. They sold it for $1 a pound, which yeah, quite a low price compared to today's valuations. But yeah, so that's how it ended up in Greensburg, signed off by Ellis Peck and H.O. Stockwell. And this other letter here is interesting. It's from H.O. to Mr. Peck, and it shows you how deep and how successful he was at finding meteorites. You know, he speaks here of a 178-pound iron meteorite, probably Canyon Diablo, which Dr. Neiniger was closing his museum in 1953. So he had to go pick that up and find another place to display it. 240-pound Texas meteorite. That's probably Odessa, another meteorite crater in Texas with iron meteorites. And then a 413-pound meteorite in Wisconsin, which is that's kind of where Sheila and I started looking for meteorites. So we've basically just been following Mr. Stockwell treasure hunting around America. And the other part of the connection with Wisconsin, there was another Professor Reed who wanted to find out about Stockwell and his activities, how he was so successful. So he wrote to him and asked, what is his metal detector? And actually it turned out to be a hidden metal detector. It was made by a company in Florida, and they were trying to develop it for detection of landmines during World War II. And another company got the contract, so they kind of went out of business. But it's he was able to supply Mr. Reed with the schematic. So it's standard what they call a 2-box metal detector, a transmitter, and a receiver. The transmitter coil and receiver coil are in the shape of a D, and then they overlap slightly to find a balance point. And then when a metal object gets into that the field of that transmitter, it'll cause a deflection of the meter that's on the metal detector. So you can tell if you're over a metal object, then you got to start digging. The technology of the day was vacuum tubes. So this ran off of two 67.5 volt batteries, 135 volts. So you had to be real careful poking around inside there. It would give you quite a bite if you touched the wrong thing. And here are the copies of that detector that were made. The one on the left there was made by Professor Reed in Wisconsin. And the one on top of my truck there, I made using transistors and 9-volt batteries. That was the technology of in the 90s. And looks like Sheila and I are stopping for a snack on the way to Kansas from Chicago. And it always left the question of what happened to that original metal detector. And we looked all over it for years. And then all of a sudden, one day, this fellow, Garth Bibbins, on the left there, calls up the big well and he says, "Hey, I've got the original Stockwell metal detector." And the story there is Garth's father, David Bibbins, was a friend to Stockwell, and they were rockhound together. And so Stockwell, when he passed away, he left the detector to David Bibbins. And when he was getting up in years, he told his son Garth, Stockwell and him would like to see the detector reunited with the 1,000-pound meteorite, because otherwise people wouldn't know what the heck that is. It looks like a radio or something. So he was afraid it would just get thrown away. So we did that. Drove over. It was in Missouri, so drove over to Missouri, got the metal detector, and had it back in the big well next to the 1,000-pound meteorite. It's not in the picture, but the 1,000-pound meteorite would have been right over about there. And this was the old big well. We had the old water tower, and the metal structure there that covers the well where you can walk down in a spiral staircase. And the gift shop was in back there. And the 1,000-pound meteorite was kind of just around the corner there. And so everything was hunky-dory until the tornado came through Greensburg, and really just unbelievable devastation. You can still see a bit of the metal cover over the well. It's still there and beat up a bit. This clean floor here, that's where the gift shop used to be. And it's just like somebody had taken their hand and swept right over the building. The metal detector was hanging on this wall and is now underneath it, crunched up a little bit. And the 1,000-pound meteorite was right about here. So we didn't want to see that. Just there was a lot of confusion after the tornado. You know, it's like communication was very, very difficult. And so we got in as soon as we could to get the meteorite retrieved. And this is my good friend, Karen Martin. She was manager at the Big Well at the time. And it was, I mean, after the tornado, it just rained like constantly. Not only did things just get damaged, they got soaked. So we got in there as soon as we could and took it over to exploration place in Wichita for safekeeping. And well, that's some time ago, and they've done a lot of work to rebuild. So now we have the new big well. 1,000-pound meteorite is there. It's really an impressive structure. Now we have the 1,000-pound meteorite and the metal detectors hanging right above it. That's my friend Ed Schoenberger. He reassembled the detector after it was damaged by the tornado, and so it's all together as Stockwell and Mr. Bibbins had hoped. So it's and of course the big well. Kids love to go down in there. So it's I'd say it's a good day trip if you ever think about going down to Greensburg there. You can visit the big well. They have the historical museum. They also recovered the soda fountain and restored it so you can get a phosphate after your visit. And so keep that in mind if you're looking for something to do for a day. And just to finish up here, credits, Mr. Ellis Peck in his book that brought us to the area. And I've got a number of meteorites here if you want to have a look at them, see what it's about. Iron meteorites, just lumps of metal, stony irons, and then stone meteorites are the most common type. Have some metal in it, but mostly just rock.
Thank you so much, Don. We do have a few minutes left for questions for either Don or Chris. Chris was kind enough to stay on the Zoom as well. Just give me one moment where I can bring him back up so we can interact with him and be thinking of your questions. There we go. All right. So, as Don mentioned, you know, that our local angle here is getting to know more about the historic Hedden brand metal detector, which you can go see, and you can go see the giant meteorite, which has been named the Space Wanderer. Those are both in Greensburg, and today at Greensburg, Kansas, for our remote viewers. And today, after our question and answer, you can definitely come up and talk with Don some more and see the samples that he has brought. And the Cosmosphere's very own meteorite is over there. It is very heavy. Please do not try to pick it up, but you can definitely touch it if you want to get your hands-on moment. So questions for either Don or Chris? Okay, there's one there. And do I have any on Zoom? Okay, great. We'll take these two and then we'll go to a chance for you to talk with Don individually. Go ahead. So for Zoom, the question is, where does the iron come from that's in meteorites?
The idea is, oh, sorry. Yeah, the idea is that the iron, for the planet, for Earth has an iron core. It all came from supernova explosions throughout the universe, and the material collapsed into what we call the solar system, the planets, and the asteroids. And in fact, in our blood, hemoglobin, we have iron in us. So we're all very part of the cosmos.
Chris, did you want to add anything about the origin of the iron?
I would just add, it was great presentation. It was so cool to hear about H.O. Stockwell again. And I would just, if you think of, the three portions of a planet, the iron core, and then the stony iron mantle, and then the stony crust. And so meteorites, those three kinds that Don explained, that's where they come from in asteroids that are big enough to have those sorts of layers, basically.
Great, thank you so much. And our last question? Oh, that's a great question. I'll repeat it for our Zoom viewers, and I'm sure many here are curious too. What happened to the marvelous collection that Don and Sheila gathered for the Havilland Meteorite Museum?
Yeah, we kind of started late, I guess, at least late in life with the Meteorite Museum, and original plan was to have it in Greensburg. Mayor McCollum had a really great location right on the corner, Main Street in Greensburg there. And then the tornado came. So we kind of, put the building up out in the country there. We never got, that much, support, business support to keep it going. And so I started having some health problems a few years back, and I was worried about, what are we going to do with all this material? So I started shopping it around. I thought it was going to take, a decade to try to sell all that stuff. I mean, we had about 8,000 or 9,000 pounds, and one person out of 8 billion people on the planet, a guy from China showed interested in it. And I said, okay. I was just kind of desperate at the time to shore up our finances. We had to put a lot of money into this effort. It hurt quite a bit to do that, but I was really hoping we were going to create a new tourist attraction for Kansas, because it's such a unique area in the whole planet. You can go out into this part of Kansas and find meteorites, and instead of going all the way to Antarctica, for example, to find materials. So yeah, that's what happened to it. I'm not proud of it.
Well, once again, I want to thank our two speakers, Chris and Don.
Thank you very much, Maria. Thank you, Don.
And if you are around in May, you'll want to come back the third Thursday in May for the awesomeness of solar eclipses, which includes a live appearance by Kansas's own astronaut, Dr. Steve Hawley. So be sure to come back third Thursday in May, 9 o'clock, right here. Thank you so much for coming, and happy St. Patrick's Day.